You cannot even imagine the deadly danger that an ordinary kiss of the dead may carry. You think it is a farewell, the last gesture of love. But Edgar Cayce, the most mysterious mystic of America, warned, "The kiss of the dead is a door that is better left unopened." Why? Because at the moment of death the body grows cold, but the soul is still nearby. It hears, sees, searches for support. And if you lean in for a kiss, you open yourself. It is not tenderness, it is an invitation. Cayce said, "Thus the dead cling to the living, taking what they themselves lacked." Think about it. How many times in history have people, wishing to say goodbye, brought upon themselves someone else's pain? One American woman, who kissed her husband in the coffin weeks later, complained, "I feel him behind me." Doctors explained it as hysteria. Cayce said plainly, "She opened the door, and now he seeks a way out through her." And here is the most frightening part. A kiss can become an exchange. What should have happened to the deceased is passed on to the living: illness, sudden misfortune, tragedy. You think you are giving love, but in reality, you are taking his unfinished path. Strangely, even the ancients knew this. The Egyptians forbade touching the body before the rituals. In Rome, they said that widows who kissed their husbands often died shortly after the funeral. Is it a coincidence that Cayce, centuries later, repeated the very same thing? But he went further. Cayce claimed the soul that is not ready to depart may literally attach itself, and the closer your emotion, the stronger your grief, the tighter the bond. This is not a metaphor. He called it an invisible pull that changes the destiny of the one left behind. In his readings, he said, "Love releases, the kiss of the dead holds, and it is exactly this that turns it into a trap." Now think, perhaps the ancient prohibitions were not superstitions, but safety instructions. Perhaps they knew a single wrong gesture can bind the living and the dead forever. But if the kiss itself is dangerous, then the most terrifying thing is what happens afterward. Edgar Cayce warned, "He who touched the dead with lips has opened a channel, and closing it is not so simple." What did he mean? The soul of the deceased does not leave immediately. It still reaches for life, for habits, for those it loved, and if the bond is already created, it will cling nearby. Such souls Cayce called delayed. They stand behind our shoulder. We do not see them, but they see everything. And this is what torments them most: to watch the living make mistakes, suffer, destroy their lives, and to have no right to interfere. You think this is frightening for them? No, it is frightening for us as well. Cayce said, "They seek a way out through the living. They seek those who are open." And most often the one who is open is exactly the one who allowed himself the kiss. Imagine, the thought you believe to be your own may not be yours. In one reading, Cayce said, "Some thoughts are echoes of foreign passions that did not manage to move on." Have you never noticed how suddenly a desire comes to mind that you never had before? An anger without cause, despair as if from nowhere? What if that is not you? The most disturbing thing, Cayce claimed such souls can influence destinies. They seem to transfer their unfinished energy to those to whom they are attached. Illnesses, accidents, repeating tragedies in families, all of this, according to him, may not be coincidence, but the result of that very kiss. And here it is important to understand. The ancients knew more than it seems. In Mexico, elders warned, "Do not touch the face of the dead, otherwise he will remain in you." In Japan, there still exists the belief that touching the lips of the departed transfers his sorrow. Coincidence? Or did different cultures on opposite sides of the world know the same truth? Cayce, however, gave a solution. He spoke of simple things that can close this channel: a sincere prayer, a word of gratitude, a good deed. All of this changes the frequency of the soul and makes it less accessible to foreign interference. But he also warned, "Every malicious thought is a door. Every act of cruelty is an invitation. And then arises the dreadful question, what if the world around us is overflowing with such delayed souls? What if wars, hatred, crimes are not only human nature, but also the pressure of those who could not depart? What if we live in an ocean of other people's unfinished passions, and it is they who push us into repeating the same evil again and again? Cayce hinted that most often we encounter them in dreams. He said, "Sleep is a little death. It is in sleep that we most often come into contact with the other world." Think, when you dream of a person who is no longer alive, is it only imagination? Or is it a real meeting which consciousness erases in the morning because it cannot withstand the truth? In one of his visions, Cayce described how souls stand in crowds at the border of the light. They stretch out their hands, but their hands have no strength. They scream, but their screams are soundless, and only those to whom they are attached can they touch. Imagine, your kiss may turn you into an anchor that holds the soul from crossing over. That is why Cayce insisted, the best farewell is to let go, but a kiss is a chain. But there is an even more dangerous point, which Edgar Cayce spoke of rarely and always with caution. He claimed that the kiss of the dead may not only create a channel, but also exchange energy. Imagine part of the pain or illness of the deceased may literally pass to the one who touched his lips. Cayce called this the transfer of the unfinished. He claimed that death is rarely easy. A person departs with fears, regrets, unfinished deeds, and when we kiss the dead, we take part of that burden. It is no coincidence that in some families, tragedies seem to repeat generation after generation. Could this be that very transfer? He told a story of a woman who, after the death of her son, could not endure it and kissed him in the coffin. Weeks later, she began to complain of choking fits, though doctors found no cause. Cayce said, "She took his last fear. He did not leave completely." Think about how many times we have heard the expression to die of grief or to catch sorrow. Perhaps these are not poetic metaphors, but a real mystical mechanism. Ancient cultures seem to know this better than us. In old Irish legends it was said, "He who kisses the dead will share his fate." In China, widows were warned not to touch the face of the departed. It was believed one could take his illness that way. And is it not strange that in different corners of the world, people came to the same conclusion? Cayce spoke even harsher. Sometimes the kiss opens a path for souls that are searching for a body, and they find the one who called them with his touch. This sounds like a scene from a horror film, but he claimed such cases happened. People began to hear footsteps at night, see shadows, feel touches on their shoulders, though no one was there, and all of this began after the funeral. But if the kiss is so dangerous, then what to do with the desire to say goodbye? Cayce said, "The best farewell is the thought of light, the thought that you let go." According to him, true love is not to hold, but to allow to leave. And here rises the main question, what if our excessive grief holds the dead back? What if our tears do not help, but instead torment them? If Cayce is to be believed, this is exactly what happens. They feel our pain, and it pulls them downward. Now imagine the opposite. Instead of a kiss, a prayer of gratitude. Instead of tears, the words, "I release you." According to Cayce, this is how the soul truly receives the chance to rise higher. But the most disturbing part is that he hinted, not all souls want to leave. There are those who hold on intentionally, and it is with them that the next, even more frightening secret is connected. The most terrible thing, which Cayce spoke of cautiously and almost in a whisper, is the souls that do not want to go. He called them attached. These beings do not seek light, they seek a body, and the kiss of the dead for them is like an open door. Imagine, a person dies with a thirst for power, with an insatiable desire to continue living at any cost. His soul does not seek peace, it seeks a way to stay. And if someone close, blinded by grief, bends down and touches him with lips, the connection closes. Now the soul has a hook by which it can cling. Cayce warned, "Such souls are neither evil nor good. They are desperate. They fear to disappear." But this is precisely why they are dangerous. Their energy is heavy, and when it penetrates the living, a person begins to change. Moods swing, thoughts darken, the body weakens. He may feel as if someone is sitting on his shoulders. Once Cayce described a man who, after his brother's funeral, began to suffer from fits of rage. He shouted at his family, broke furniture, though before he had been quiet and gentle. In a reading, Cayce said, "He is not alone. His brother is still in him." Imagine the horror, to live with another's soul that will not leave. It is no surprise that in many cultures there was fear of the returning. In Greece, they buried the dead with coins on their eyes so they would not find their way back. In Africa, they still practice cleansing rituals after funerals to cut the bond between the dead and the living. All these traditions seem to scream to us, "Do not allow the dead to enter your life." And here you begin to understand why the kiss is so dangerous. It is not just a gesture of love, it is an invitation, and if the invitation is accepted, closing the door is almost impossible. Cayce said that such souls often give signals. You may feel a sudden cold, hear footsteps behind you, see a shadow out of the corner of your eye. They do not always wish harm, but their presence destroys the living, because two consciousnesses cannot share one body. Think about how many stories we have heard of how, after funerals, people suddenly went insane, fell ill, or died under strange circumstances. What if all these cases are not coincidence, but the result of someone leaning too close once and giving a kiss? Cayce claimed, "There is no greater gift to the soul than freedom, but there is no greater horror for the living than to share the body with one who has not left." And here arises another frightening question. What if such souls truly walk among us? If they wander nearby, does our touch to the dead only strengthen their presence? Edgar Cayce noted that most often attached souls reveal themselves in dreams. He said, "Sleep is a little death. In those moments, the boundaries between worlds blur. It is exactly then that they seek access, exactly then that they try to enter." Many people complained that after funerals, they dreamed of the deceased calling them, reaching out their hands, sometimes asking, "Come with me." Cayce claimed that if in a dream you agree or embrace the dead, then in waking life you will begin to lose strength. At first this shows as fatigue, then as illness, and later as complete dependence on another's will. One woman told how after the death of her husband, she dreamed every night that he kissed her on the lips. A month later, she began to suffer severe chest pains, and soon doctors found a serious heart condition. Cayce said, "She allowed him to stay close, but he took her strength." It is terrifying to imagine, but it is precisely through such dreams that the dead find their way back. They use the weakness of the living, their grief, their unwillingness to let go, and the stronger the mourning, the wider the door stands open. It is no wonder that in some Native American tribes it was believed, "You must not weep over the dead for too long. Tears call him back." And among Tibetans there was a ritual. In the first 3 days after death, relatives had to read prayers aloud to guide the soul further and prevent it from returning. Cayce added, "A kiss in life joins hearts, a kiss in death joins destinies." That is why he insisted, never touch the body after the last breath. And if it has already happened, then speak words of farewell, mentally releasing the soul. But he also spoke of something else, the most dangerous of all. Sometimes a soul does not simply seek a body or strength, but wishes to continue its unfinished deeds. Then it begins to push the living toward actions he himself would never have chosen. Cayce described cases where people suddenly lost memory for several minutes, and afterward it turned out they had done strange things. Destroyed objects, spoken in another voice, written incomprehensible words, and if you think about it, Many stories of possession may be connected to this. Not demons in the usual sense, but souls that would not release life. The most chilling thing was Cayce's hint that such souls around us are far more numerous than we think. He said, "You walk down the street, and you do not know who among the passers-by carries another destiny within." And here arises a new frightening thought. What if part of our fears, illnesses, sudden bursts of rage are not us? What if they are those still clinging to our world, grabbing onto every open door? Cayce understood. If there is danger in kissing the dead, if souls can attach to the living, then there must be a way of protection. But he warned immediately, there is no 100% guarantee. He said, the living can protect themselves if their heart is pure and their intention clear. It sounds simple, but how often are our intentions clouded by resentment, anger, envy? And it is precisely through those cracks that the attached souls slip in. Cayce advised several steps. First, after funerals, avoid loneliness. He claimed that an empty house is an ideal trap, because in silence a person becomes too vulnerable. Second, speak words of gratitude and release. You are free. Go further. He emphasized that sincere words are stronger than tears. In one of his readings he said, prayer is not protection by itself. It is a key, but the door must be closed by the person himself. And this is the most frightening. No priest, no shaman can do for you what only you must do. He told of a case where a woman lit a candle every evening and said to her husband, "You may go." And after several weeks her dreams changed. Her husband no longer came. She said, "I wept, but I felt relief." Cayce called this the breaking of the chain. But he also warned, it does not always work. If a soul is too tenacious, if the person is too weak, the door remains ajar. And then strange events begin. Objects breaking in the house, sudden odors, an unbearable sense of being watched. Cayce said, "This is not coincidence. These are signs that someone is still near." Sometimes even simple things became triggers. He mentioned that the possessions of the dead, clothing, jewelry, personal items, could serve as channels. The more they were infused with energy, the greater the risk. That is why many peoples burned or hid the belongings of the dead to sever the bond. Think about it. How many people keep at home clothes, photographs, favorite items of the departed, not realizing that with them they also preserve an unseen thread? Perhaps this is why, in some families, tragedies, illnesses, disasters repeat generation after generation. Cayce never tired of repeating, the best thing you can give the dead is to release them. Love binds, but love also frees. And yet there remained one horrifying detail. Sometimes he said that even released souls may return, not because they wish to, but because they are called. The living themselves pull them back, with thoughts, with grief, with kisses on the pillow where once a loved one lay. And that call sometimes proves stronger than any prayer. And here appears the most terrifying question. What if the matter is not only in the dead? What if the real danger lies in us ourselves, in our inability to let go? Cayce said that people are mistaken when they think the kiss of the dead is a farewell. He claimed, a kiss is a pact. It binds no less than an oath. Imagine, in the moment of loss, the heart is torn by pain, and the living, without realizing it, pronounces invisible words, "I will not let you go." And the dead answers, "I will stay." That is why Cayce insisted that one must never lean to the lips of the deceased. He asserted that this instant becomes a crossing point, where the soul and body of the living connect with the energy of the departed, and it is exactly then that destiny changes. In one of his readings he told a woman, "You kissed him, and so now you walk his path." She was surprised. "But he died in an accident. What does that mean?" Cayce answered, "You carry his fear, his unfinished business. Until you forgive and release, part of your life will go in place of his." It is terrifying to realize, but Cayce saw in this not just symbolism, but a real intertwining of destinies. He claimed that some illnesses, misfortunes, or even strange coincidences occur because the living carry within them another's fate. This explained cases where widows began to repeat the illnesses of their husbands, where parents suddenly departed after their children, where entire families seemed bound by a single tragedy. He said, "This is not fate. This is a bond you created yourselves." Cayce rarely allowed himself to speak openly, but in one reading, his words sounded especially chilling. "Who kisses the dead kisses eternity, but eternity is not always kind." And here arises the thought, maybe that is exactly why in many cultures people were forbidden to touch the body after death, not because it was unclean, but because it was dangerous for the living. In ancient Egypt, only priests had the right to approach the body and perform rituals. In Europe until the Middle Ages, there was a custom of closing the mouth of the dead with a coin or cloth, not for peace, but so no one would touch the lips. All these customs scattered across the world seem to form a puzzle, spelling out one warning. The kiss of the dead is not farewell, it is a deal that can become a heavy burden. And here, Cayce asked a question that sounded like a sentence. Are you ready to bear not only your own life, but another's? Cayce said that to break the bond created by the kiss of the dead is almost impossible. You form a union, and each side gives part of itself. The living the strength, the dead shadow, and breaking that is harder than untying the tightest rope. And yet he left a tiny hope. In one of his readings he said, "Love can bind, but love also frees. Only a sincere readiness to let go can break the chain." But he added, "Few can do it, because the pain of loss seems sweeter than the emptiness without it." He gave examples of people who lived under another's destiny for years. A woman who lost her son kissed his photograph every evening. She said she felt him close, but her health collapsed. Her life turned into a chain of misfortunes. Cayce said, she lived his life, not her own. Sometimes he advised rituals of release, burn an object of the dead, speak words of farewell, give to a temple or church what tied you, but he warned, a ritual is only a shell. If the heart is not ready, the door will not close. And the most chilling of all, he claimed that some bonds do not break even after the living one dies. A soul tied by a kiss remains close and departs with you. You think death will free you, but death takes you to where you yourself tied yourself. These words sound like a sentence. If you think about it, it becomes clear. The kiss of the dead is not simply a moment of mourning, it is a choice of path, and this choice is irreversible. Perhaps that is why in all cultures there were taboos and prohibitions. People were forbidden to touch the body, the eyes of the deceased were closed, cloths wrapped around the head so no one would dare approach. In every action was hidden the same thought. Protect the living from a bond they themselves will not be able to break. Cayce said, death is a door, but what you do in the moment of farewell determines on which side of the door you will be. And here arises a question that cannot be ignored. How many people already live not their own life? How many destinies are entangled because someone once could not resist and kissed cold lips? This thought chills the blood. For perhaps it is exactly why some families for generations bear tragedies, illnesses, poverty. It is not a curse, it is a bond created by a kiss. And in the end, Cayce spoke words that sound like a warning for everyone. If you love, let go. If you kiss, be ready to go together. And now remains the most important question. What will you choose? Cayce warned, death does not take everything at once. It only opens the door. But in that second when we lean to the departed, when lips touch cold skin, it is not their fate that is decided but ours. The kiss of the dead is a promise, and promises eternity demands to be kept. Think about that. You may weep, you may scream, you may keep the memory. But if in the moment of farewell you do not release, then one night you will hear a whisper that cannot be mistaken. And then you will understand. What Cayce said was not just words.